Have you ever wondered what your dreams mean? Like, what's your sleeping brain trying to tell you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I have dreams all the time that I'm just like, what was that about?
Right. Well, I'm Andrew,
I'm Stephanie.
and today we're going to try to unlock some of those mysteries. We're diving into This Is Why You Dream, what your sleeping brain reveals about your waking life.
Ooh, catchy title.
It is. And it's by Dr. Rahul Jandial. He's a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist.
Double threat. I bet he has some pretty interesting insights.
Definitely. So right away in chapter 1, we have evolved to dream. He kind of flips the script. Like, we always hear how important sleep is, right?
Oh, yeah, sleep is everything.
He's like, hold on, what if the dreams themselves are even more important?
Yeah.
And get this, he does these awake brain surgeries where he stimulates different parts of the brain with tiny electrical jolts.
Whoa, awake brain surgery? Is that like a thing?
It is. Apparently, it's more common than you'd think. And when he does this, patients experience all kinds of crazy things. Memories, smells, even like mini dreams.
Wild. So even while they're awake, he can make them have these dreamlike experiences.
Exactly. And it helps him map the brain and operate safely, but it's also given him a ton of insight into how dreams actually work.
So how does that even happen? Like, what's going on in the brain to create those dreams?
Well, he explains it all comes down to our neurons, those brain cells that are always firing off signals, even when we're asleep and there's no input from the outside world.
Okay. So our brains are never really off, even when we are.
Exactly. He calls it stimulus-independent cognition, basically. Our brains are constantly active, even without our senses feeding it information.
Huh. So even without anything happening around us, our brain is still busy creating its own world.
Totally. And it gets even cooler. There's this network in our brains called the imagination network. It takes those random neuron firings and turns them into stories, characters, emotions, all that.
So our brains are basically writing and directing our dreams, like a little movie studio in our heads.
That's a great way to put it. And he argues it's not just for entertainment. This imagination network helps us process emotions, work through experiences.
Makes sense. I've definitely had dreams that felt like they were helping me sort through stuff that was going on in my life.
Right. And he even mentions a study of divorcing couples, where the people who had more complex emotional dreams about their exes actually recovered from depression faster. Like their brains were working through those emotions in their dreams.
Wow. So dreams aren't just some random side effect of sleep. They're actually serving a purpose.
That's what he's suggesting. And it leads right into chapter 2. We need nightmares, which at first you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, that doesn't sound very appealing.
Right. But he shares this case study about Julia, a yoga teacher. And she had these incredibly vivid, violent nightmares, total opposite from her peaceful waking life.
Oh, wow. Like totally out of character for her.
Exactly. But here's the thing, he says, everyone have nightmares. Doesn't matter what your life is like, everyone experiences them at some point.
Huh. Interesting. So what's the deal with nightmares then? Why would we have them if they're so unpleasant?
Well, he believes they might actually help us develop a sense of self, especially during childhood. Like when we're young, our brains are still figuring out who we are, individually and in relation to others.
Right, like forming our identity.
Yeah, exactly. And he thinks the challenges we face in nightmares, like being chased by monsters or whatever, actually help us solidify those senses of self.
So it's like a mental training ground, preparing us for the challenges we'll face in the real world.
Totally. And he even mentioned some research about how, as kids get older, their nightmares tend to decrease. Maybe because they've hit those developmental milestones.
That's pretty fascinating. So even nightmares play a role in our development.
It seems that way. And then to make things even more interesting, he talks about gender differences in nightmares.
Oh, really? What are the differences?
Well, around age 12, girls start having more nightmares than boys.
Huh. And what about the content of the nightmares? Is there a difference there too?
Yeah. Girls' nightmares are more likely to feature human or small animal aggressors, whereas boys are more likely to encounter like monsters or large animals. He links it to how boys and girls are socialized differently.
So even our nightmares reflect societal patterns and expectations. That's pretty wild.
It is. And get this, he even brings up epigenetics, like the possibility that a predisposition to nightmares could be inherited.
Epigenetics. Can you remind me what that is again?
Sure. Basically, it means our environment and experiences can actually change how our genes work. And those changes can get passed down to future generations.
Got it. So it's not just about the genes themselves, but also how our environment and experiences shape how those genes express themselves.
Exactly. And he wonders if that's why some families seem to have more nightmares than others, like a legacy of fear or something.
That's both spooky and super interesting.
I know, right? And then, speaking of spooky, he delves into sleep paralysis.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about sleep paralysis. That's when you wake up but you can't move, right?
Right. You're conscious, but you're totally paralyzed. You might feel pressure on your chest, have trouble breathing, even have hallucinations, like seeing shadows or feeling like someone's in the room with you.
That sounds terrifying. No wonder people used to think it was demons or something.
No kidding. But he explains that it's actually a neurological thing. It often happens when our brains wake up before our bodies do. So we're stuck in this weird in-between state.
So our brain is awake, but our body is still in sleep mode.
Pretty much. And those hallucinations. He thinks they might be caused by a few things. One is the activation of the temporal junction. It's this part of the brain that helps us understand where our body is in space. When it gets activated during sleep paralysis, it can trick us into feeling like there's someone else in the room.
Whoa, so our brains are playing tricks on us.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
He also mentions serotonin, that neurotransmitter that's involved in sleep and mood.
Yeah, serotonin, it's like the happy chemical, right?
Exactly. But imbalances in serotonin, especially during that transition between sleep and waking, can also contribute to those sleep paralysis hallucinations.
So it's like our brain is waking up out of sync with our body, plus some weird brain activity, and bam, we have this terrifying experience.
Pretty much. And what's crazy is that he says our beliefs can actually make sleep paralysis worse.
Wait, really? How can what we believe affect a neurological phenomenon?
Think about it. If you wake up paralyzed and you think it's demons, you're going to be way more freaked out than someone who understands the science behind it. And that fear can actually intensify the physical sensations, making the whole thing even more traumatic.
So our expectations and beliefs can actually fuel those physical symptoms.
Exactly. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the good news is he offers some tips for dealing with nightmares and sleep paralysis, things like autosuggestion, where you basically tell yourself what you want to dream about before you fall asleep.
Like if I tell myself I'm going to dream about winning the lottery tonight, it might actually happen.
Well, maybe not winning the lottery, but you might be able to influence the content of your dreams. He also mentions imagery rehearsal therapy, where you work with a therapist to literally rewrite your nightmares, like creating a new, more positive version and practicing it during the day.
So it's like giving your brain a new script to follow.
Exactly. And he even talks about lucid dreaming, which is becoming aware that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream.
Whoa, like being conscious inside your own dream.
Exactly. And he says lucid dreaming can be a really powerful way to overcome nightmares. If you could become lucid during a nightmare, you might be able to confront your fear, change the outcome, or even just wake yourself up.
That's so empowering, like taking back control of your subconscious.
Totally. But he does point out that nightmares stemming from PTSD are a bit different. Since they're rooted in real trauma, those require more specialized therapy to address those underlying issues.
That makes sense. Trauma is way more complex and needs a different approach.
Definitely. Okay, so moving on from those rather intense topics, let's shift gears to something a little more, shall we say, enjoyable. Chapter 3 is all about the power of erotic dreams.
Oh la la! Now we're talking.
Right. And right away, he debunks this myth that they're directly related to how much sex you're having.
So it's not just a case of you are what you dream.
Nope. He actually suggests they might be more connected to how often you have erotic daydreams. Basically, how much time you spend fantasizing while you're awake.
Interesting. So it's more about the thoughts and desires that are already present in our minds.
Exactly. And then he drops this wild concept called the Halle-Berry neuron.
The Halle-Berry neuron. Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
So researchers found that we have individual neurons that respond specifically to images of certain celebrities.
Wait, seriously, so like if I have a dream about Chris Hemsworth, it's because my Chris Hemsworth neuron is firing off.
Yeah. Basically. It shows the power of familiarity. Our brains form strong associations with people we see a lot, even if we don't actually know them personally.
So it's like our brains have built-in celebrity crush circuits.
Exactly. Then he goes on to explain myelination. It's that process of strengthening neural connections.
Right, man. Myelination, it's like putting insulation on those neural wires.
Exactly. And the more we think about or do something, the more efficient those pathways become.
So the more we fantasize about something, the more real it feels to our brains.
Pretty much. And he thinks this might be why erotic dreams can feel so intense and lifelike, even without any physical stimulation.
Makes sense. It's like our brains are creating these virtual reality experiences based on our own desires.
Exactly. And then he emphasizes this idea that the brain is the most powerful sex organ we have.
I'd have to agree with him there. It's the source of all those fantasies and desires.
Right. He points out that erotic dreams can even induce physical arousal and orgasms, even though there's no physical touch involved.
That's incredible. Our brains are capable of generating that much pleasure on their own.
It's a testament to the power of imagination. And then, to reassure all the worried partners out there, he talks about those dreams where you might cheat on your significant other.
Oh, yeah. Those can be a bit unsettling.
He says, don't freak out. They don't necessarily mean you actually want to cheat.
That's a relief.
It could just be your brain exploring different scenarios or maybe expressing some curiosity. It doesn't automatically translate to real-life desires.
That's good to know. It's all about understanding how the imagination network is at play.
Exactly. It's about context. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Just wait till we get to how dreams can make us more creative. That's coming up next.
I'm already hooked. Oh, yeah. Definitely intense. But now, get ready to be amazed, because we're going to dive into how dreams can boost our creative side. Chapter 4. Dreams make us more creative.
You ready for this?
I'm all ears. But I gotta admit, I'm a little skeptical. I mean, how can these weird random dreams make us more creative?
I know, right? Seems kind of counterintuitive. But Dr. Jandial cooks it off with his fascinating case study about Anna, an aspiring screenwriter. She was struggling with writer's block, couldn't come up with any good ideas.
Ah, the dreaded writer's block. I've been there. So how did dreams help her out?
Okay, so get this. She developed a cyst on her brain. Sounds pretty bad, right?
Yeah, that's definitely not something you want to hear.
But here's the twist. The cyst was pressing on a specific part of her brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, or DPFC. This area is like the command center for our executive network, that part that helps us plan, organize, make decisions.
So like the logical, practical part of our brains.
Exactly. But the cyst was messing with it. And guess what? When that executive network gets suppressed, another network takes over.
Let me guess. The imagination network.
Ding, 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 you got it. And suddenly, Anna's creativity exploded. She was overflowing with ideas, characters, storylines. It's like she was seeing the world through dream-colored glasses.
Oh. So, in a way, this cyst gave her a sneak peek into what it's like to have an unfiltered imagination network. Like, what happens when we dream?
Exactly what Dr. Jandial is suggesting. He uses her case to show how powerful dreams can be for boosting our creativity. Because that imagination network, it's all about finding new solutions, making unexpected connections, the very definition of creativity.
Yeah. When we're dreaming, it's like anything goes. We're not bound by logic or reality.
Right. It's a free-for-all in there. And he talks about adrenaline playing a role, too.
Adrenaline, isn't that supposed to make us more alert and focused? How does that tie into creativity?
Good question. He says that while adrenaline is great for keeping us on our toes, it can actually put limits on our creative thinking.
Huh, interesting. So it's like adrenaline keeps us focused on the task at hand, but might prevent us from thinking outside the box.
That's the idea. And when we're dreaming, our adrenaline levels are way down, so our minds are free to wander and explore those out there ideas.
Makes sense. It's like when you're trying to solve a problem and you just can't crack it, but then you take a break, do something else, and suddenly the answer pops into your head.
That's exactly what he calls the incubation period. And he says it can be super effective if it involves REM sleep. It's like our brains are working on the problem in the background while we dream. Then they're like, hey, here's the solution when we wake up.
Like our brains have a night shift working on those tough problems.
Exactly. He mentions a study where people who took a nap with REM sleep were 40% better at solving creative problems than those who just rested quietly. Dreaming itself boosts our creativity, even if we don't remember those specific dreams.
So even those forgotten dreams might be shaping our thoughts and ideas.
Absolutely. And think about all the famous artists and thinkers who've been inspired by dreams, like Graham Greene, John Steinbeck. The list goes on.
So this isn't just a theory. It's something that's been recognized by some of the greatest creative minds.
Definitely. And if you're thinking, okay, how can I tap into that creative dream power? Dr. Jandial actually offers some tips for priming those dreams for creativity.
I'm listening.
Well, remember autosuggestion, where you tell yourself what you want to dream about? That can work for creativity too. But he emphasizes visualization, creating vivid mental images of the problem you want to solve. It's like planting a seed in your subconscious and seeing what grows.
Ooh, I like that. Anything else?
Well, technology's getting in on the action too. MIT researchers are actually developing a device that uses sensors to detect when someone is falling asleep. Then it delivers verbal cues to kind of steer their dreams.
Whoa, that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does. But it shows how much we're learning about how to influence our dreams. And Chapter 5, Dreaming and Health. What dreams reveal about our well-being, it really goes beyond the dreams are just wishes idea.
It really does.
It's crazy. Like there's this story about a patient whose dreams basically warned him something was wrong. He kept having these really vivid dreams about animals.
Oh, wow.
Turns out it was an early warning sign of a neurological condition years before he had any other symptoms.
Yeah, that's a great example of how dreams can be like an early warning system, especially with things like Parkinson's disease.
Whoa. Dreams can predict Parkinson's.
Well, not the dream itself. It's more like a sleep disorder that often comes before it. It's called dream enactment behavior, DEB.
Okay, DEB. What is that?
So you know how when we're sleeping, our muscles are basically paralyzed?
Right, so we don't act out our dreams.
Exactly. Well, with DEB, that paralysis doesn't happen. People actually start acting out their dreams, which can be pretty wild.
Wild how? Like sleepwalking, or is it more?
More like punching, kicking, even yelling. Sometimes they wrestle imaginary attackers in their sleep.
Whoa.
The chapter even mentions one patient who put his wife in a headlock while he was dreaming.
Oh my gosh. That's kind of terrifying.
It can be, and that's where the Parkinson's connection comes in. DEB often shows up years, sometimes decades, before any Parkinson's symptoms show up, like tremors or stiffness.
So it's like a hidden clue that something's up neurologically.
Exactly.
Wow. That is mind-blowing. Makes you wonder what else our dreams could be telling us.
Yeah. The chapter also talks about how dream content can be linked to other physical problems, not just neurological ones.
Like what?
Well, there's this researcher, Vasily Kosatkin. He studied how dream images can be connected to physical health. Like he found people who dreamed about nausea and spoiled food. They often developed gastritis later on. And people who dreamt about rats chewing on their abdomen, sometimes they were later diagnosed with ulcers.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that pizza dream I had last night means I have an ulcer?
Well, not necessarily. These connections are super interesting, but it's hard to prove that dreams actually cause illness.
Right. Like maybe people only remembered those dreams after they got sick.
Exactly.
Huh.
It's a bit of a chicken or the egg situation. But even if it's just a connection, it makes you think about how the mind and body are connected and how our dreams could be showing us what's going on beneath the surface.
Okay, so dreams can maybe give us a heads up about physical problems, but what about mental and emotional well-being? Can dreams tell us anything about that?
Absolutely. The chapter talks about some research on how dreams reflect our emotions and how we cope, especially with big life changes like divorce.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
So studies show that women who handle divorce well emotionally, they often dream about their exes in a neutral way. Like their dreams are helping them process the separation and detach in a healthy way.
So it's not about having good dreams about your ex.
No.
But more about not dwelling on the emotional baggage.
Exactly. It's about finding peace, even in their dreams. And then the chapter also talks about the link between dreams and depression.
Yeah, I could see that. People who are depressed probably have more negative dreams, right?
Right. People with major depressive disorder, they have nightmares way more often than people without depression.
Oh, wow.
And studies have even found a connection between frequent nightmares and suicidal behavior, especially in teenagers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Nightmares are serious, especially for people who are already struggling.
Yeah.
They can be a sign that someone needs help.
Yeah, for sure. You realize dreams can be a window into some pretty serious mental health stuff.
Absolutely. And speaking of influencing dreams, get ready for Chapter 6, Lucid Dreams, a hybrid of the waking and dreaming minds. It's all about becoming aware that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream.
Wait, what? That's even possible. Like, you know you're dreaming while it's happening.
Yep. It's like being conscious inside your own dream world. And Dr. Jandial talks about this groundbreaking experiment from the 1970s that proved lucid dreaming is a real thing. They had this skilled lucid dreamer, Alan Worsley, hooked up to monitors in a sleep lab. And they told him to move his eyes in a specific pattern when he became lucid.
Like sending a signal from inside his dream.
Exactly. And it worked. His brainwaves showed he was in REM sleep, but his eyes started moving in that exact pattern. Proof that he was conscious and aware even while he was dreaming.
That's crazy. So it's not just some mystical idea. Science actually backs up the idea of lucid dreaming.
It's wild, right? And he explains it happens when part of our executive network, that logical part, kind of reactivates while we're dreaming.
So it's like a little bit of our waking consciousness sneaks into the dream world.
Exactly. And that allows for self-awareness and even some control over what happens. He does point out that lucid dreams are often fleeting and not perfectly controlled. It's not like you suddenly have superpowers or anything.
Right, but still, pretty amazing to think about. What kinds of benefits are there to lucid dreaming?
Well, it's been used for spiritual exploration in tons of cultures. People have used it to connect with ancestors, seek guidance, experience something bigger than themselves.
So it's like a way to tap into a deeper level of consciousness.
It's definitely associated with those kinds of experiences, but it also has therapeutic applications, helping people overcome nightmares, phobias, even anxiety.
That makes sense. If you could face your fears in a safe space where you know it's not real, that could be really helpful.
Exactly. It's like exposure therapy for the mind. And there's even evidence suggesting that lucid dreaming can be used to enhance physical performance. Athletes using it to practice skills or new techniques without risking injury in the real world.
So it's like a mental and physical training ground. That's incredible. But how do you even learn to do it?
There are a few different techniques. One popular one is called Wake Back to Bed, WBTB for short. Basically, you set an alarm to wake yourself up a few hours before you normally would, stay awake for a bit, then go back to sleep.
So it's like intentionally disrupting your sleep to make your brain more aware.
Exactly. There's also a technique called Wellbeing, which stands for mnemonic induction of lucid dreams. It involves repeating a phrase to yourself over and over as you're falling asleep, like, I will know I'm dreaming. Kind of like planting a suggestion in your subconscious.
Pretty cool. Anything else?
He talks about reality testing. Getting into the habit of questioning whether you're awake or dreaming throughout the day. It makes you more sensitive to the little clues that might tip you off that you're in a dream.
That's interesting. It's like training your mind to be more aware of its own state of consciousness.
Exactly. And then there are some, let's say, advanced techniques, like using a drug called galantamine, which has been shown to increase the frequency of lucid dreams.
Hold on. A drug for lucid dreaming? That's wild.
I know, right? It basically boosts levels of a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which is involved in memory and learning. And it seems like that boost can make dreams more vivid and increase awareness within them.
Amazing how much we're learning about how the brain works and creates these alternate realities.
It's truly mind-blowing. All right, so you want to know how to induce lucid dreams. Let's unlock those secrets and dive into Chapter 7, How to Induce Lucid Dreams. We're going to look at techniques that actually have some science behind them.
Yeah, research is really coming a long way. It's pretty exciting. But, like anything new, lucid dreaming takes practice, and different things work for different people. This chapter digs into a few techniques, and what's interesting is how they play with our sleep cycles and even like our brain chemistry. Pretty neat stuff.
So let's start with that first technique, Wake Back to Bed, WBTB for short.
Right.
It sounds pretty basic. You set an alarm a few hours before you usually wake up, then stay awake for 20-30 minutes, and then you go back to sleep. That second cycle is where the magic happens, right? More lucid dreams then. But why? Why is that second cycle so special?
Well, think about what happens when you wake up. You get a surge of serotonin, the stuff that makes you feel awake and alert. And when you fall back asleep, the serotonin levels go down naturally. It's during that transition, kind of a sweet spot, where your brain can be more open to lucidity.
So you're basically creating a shift in your brain chemistry to make lucid dreaming more likely.
Yeah, exactly. Like opening a window in your sleep cycle where these vivid conscious dreams can slip in.
I like that analogy. Okay, what about that second technique? Senses-initiated lucid dream, SLLE.
Right, SLD.
This one's all about focusing on your senses as you're falling asleep.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because this technique, it's much gentler than WBTB. It's not about jolting yourself awake. It's more about internal awareness, With SLED, you're shifting your attention between what you see, what you hear, and what you feel physically, almost like prepping your brain to notice those little details that tell you you're in a dream.
So instead of messing with brain chemistry, you're training your awareness.
Exactly. Some researchers think that shifting your focus between senses activates parts of the brain's executive network.
And that
it's the part that's responsible for logic, decision-making, things we usually don't associate with dreaming.
Right. Okay.
So it's like you're bringing a little bit of your waking consciousness into the dream world.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So maybe that little flicker of the executive network is what helps us realize we're dreaming and become lucid.
Could be. That's the idea. Anyway. So We've got one technique that plays with brain chemistry, another that activates different parts of the brain. What about that third one from the chapter?
Yeah, what's that all about?
The combined induction technique. It's kind of like it combines elements of WBTB, reality testing, even mental rehearsal.
Okay, a supercharged approach?
Yeah, you could say that, and researchers have found it to be super effective, even with people who've never had a lucid dream before.
Wow, so what exactly is reality testing and mental rehearsal?
Reality testing. Well, it's basically getting into the habit of questioning if you're awake or dreaming, even when you're fully awake.
Wait, so I should just be walking around all day like, am I dreaming?
Not constantly, but doing little checks throughout the day can really make a difference. Like, look at your hands, that's a classic one.
Hands. Why hands?
Well, turns out our brains have a hard time accurately, picturing hands in dreams. They might look distorted or have too many fingers or change shape right in front of you.
Oh, that's creepy, but also kind of cool. So if I'm looking at my hands and they're doing weird things, that's a sign I'm dreaming.
Exactly. And the more you do those checks when you're awake, the more likely you are to do them in your dreams, which can then trigger lucidity.
So reality testing primes your brain to spot those little inconsistencies that give away the dream.
Right, precisely. And the mental rehearsal part of the combined induction technique, well, it involves vividly imagining yourself having a lucid dream. You basically walk yourself through the scenario in your mind before you go to sleep.
So you're kind of creating a mental script for your dream to follow.
Yeah, it's like giving your brain a blueprint for lucidity. And when you combine that with WBTB and reality testing, well, you're really stacking the deck in your favor.
So this combined induction technique sounds pretty intense. We've got 3 very different techniques, all aimed at inducing lucid dreams. What's the main takeaway? Should people just pick one and stick with it?
Well, the interesting thing is, while these techniques have shown some promising results, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's really about finding what works best for you.
So a bit of trial and error. Maybe even combining different elements to create a personalized approach.
Exactly. And remember, like any skill, patience and persistence are key.
Yeah.
Don't get discouraged if it doesn't happen right away. The more you practice, the more likely you are to unlock the potential of lucid dreaming.
That's encouraging to hear. And speaking of mind-blowing, let's jump ahead to Chapter 8, The Future of Dreaming. Dr. Jandial takes us on a trip into the future of our dream lives.
Okay, I'm ready. What's in store for our dreams? Flying cars. Dream vacations.
Well, how about this? Researchers are getting closer to being able to decode our dreams.
Decode, like translate them into something we can understand.
Yeah. Using technology to turn our brain activity during dreaming into actual images or even videos.
Wait, are you serious? They could actually watch our dreams.
It's getting there. Dr. Jandial talks about Yukiyasu Kamitani, a researcher who's been using fMRI scans to find patterns of brain activity that match certain dream content.
So, like, he could look at a brain scan and say, this person was dreaming about a beach.
It's heading in that direction. He can already identify broad categories like people, animals, objects, even emotions. It's still early days, but the technology is advancing rapidly.
Wow. That's incredible, but also a little creepy, right? Like, well, we need new privacy laws to protect our dreams.
That's a great point, and one that Dr. Jandial brings up. Imagine if advertisers could tap into our dreams and hit us with targeted ads while we sleep.
Ugh, that sounds awful, like a nightmare come true.
Right. He actually talks about how some companies are already experimenting with dream advertising. Molson Coors created this dream-inducing video filled with beer imagery. Encouraged people to watch it before bed, hoping to influence their dreams.
That's messed up. It's like subliminal messaging 2.0.
Yeah, definitely raises some ethical questions. And then there was Burger King with their Nightmare King burger. They actually marketed it as inducing nightmares.
Okay, that's just wrong. It feels like we need to start putting up some boundaries around our subconscious minds.
I hear you. But there's also a ton of potential for using technology to make our dreams better. Dr. Jandial talks about dream engineering, the idea that we might someday be able to choose our dreams like we pick movies on Netflix.
Now that's a future I can get behind. Choosing the genre, the setting, the characters. It would be like having your own personal dream director.
Exactly. And he also mentions how scents can influence our dreams. Apparently, smells can bypass the thalamic gate, which is like a filter in our brain, so they can sneak into our dreams without waking us up.
Really? So I could, like, set the mood for my dream by diffusing some lavender oil before bed?
It's possible.
Yeah.
He talks about studies where researchers use scents to boost learning and even help people fight addiction.
That's wild. It's like hacking your brain through your sense of smell.
I know, right?
Ugh.
But of course, like any powerful technology, there's always the potential for misuse. Dr. Jandial is concerned about companies collecting our neural data through devices like smartwatches and using it to manipulate our dreams for profit.
Yeah, that's definitely a slippery slope. Our innermost thoughts and desires shouldn't be up for grabs.
Definitely not. But the good news is there are organizations fighting for ethical guidelines and legal protections around neurotechnologies and dream manipulation. Groups like UNESCO and the Neuro Rights Foundation.
That's reassuring. It's important to have people thinking about these issues and trying to protect our mental privacy. We need to be proactive about safeguarding our dreams.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered some pretty futuristic stuff, but let's bring it back down to earth for a moment. In the final chapter, The Power of Dream Interpretation, Dr. Jandial gives us a framework for interpreting our own dreams.
Ooh, I've always been fascinated by dream interpretation, but I never really knew where to start.
Well, he says those dream dictionaries that tell you a snake means betrayal or whatever are pretty much bogus.
Yeah, I'd always thought those were a little too one-size-fits-all. There's no way one symbol can mean the same thing for everyone.
Exactly. He thinks dream interpretation should be more personal. He suggests a two-step approach. First, identify the dominant emotion in your dream. How did the dream make you feel? He says those emotionally charged dreams are the most insightful.
That makes sense. Our emotions are such a big part of our lives. Of course, they'd show up in our dreams, too.
Totally. And once you've got that emotion pinned down, then you can consider the central image or symbol in the dream. He says dreams are super visual, so thinking about those images and what they might represent metaphorically can be really powerful.
So it's not about taking the images literally, but trying to understand what they symbolize on a deeper level.
Right. He gave an example of a sexual assault survivor who kept dreaming about being swept up in a tornado. And the tornado, in that context, could represent that feeling of overwhelming fear and helplessness she felt during the assault.
Wow, so even these seemingly random images can hold so much meaning.
Absolutely. Dr. Jandial really emphasizes that dream interpretation is more of an art than a science. There's no single right answer. It's about exploring the possibilities and seeing what feels true for you.
I like that. It puts us back in control of our own dream world.
Exactly. It's about trusting your own intuition and insights.
Love it. Makes dream interpretation feel more like a creative journey of self-discovery.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to bring it full circle, Dr. Jandial mentions that research suggesting brain activity during death actually resembles dreaming.
Whoa, really? So like our brains are having one last dream as we die?
It's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about those near-death experiences people talk about, those feelings of peace, transcendence. Maybe those are glimpses into that final dream state.
Whoa. That's both beautiful and kind of eerie. It really makes you think.
It does. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Dreams, nightmares, erotic dreams, lucid dreaming, even dream engineering and death dreams. They remind us that there's still so much we don't know about the human mind, and that our inner worlds are just as vast and complex as the world outside.
I completely agree. So to all our listeners out there, the next time you wake up from a dream, don't just brush it off. Take a moment to sit with it, explore it. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Sweet dreams, everyone.
Sweet dreams.